I'm the dude. So that's what you call me.
Are you a virgin?
Yeah, not since I was 10.
Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret.
Come on to the coast. We get together, have a few laughs.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Can I return it if it doesn't fit?
It always fits. Eventually.
Welcome back to Movie Mingle. I'm Caveman.
And I'm Maggie.
And we're doing episode 25 today, The Truman Show.
Ta-da!
From 1998. It was... I'm trying to remember what it was like watching this movie back then, because I'm pretty sure I saw this in the theater.
I might have also seen this in the theater, actually. Yeah.
I was a big fan of Jim Carrey, and it was rated PG, so my parents probably had no problem letting me go see it.
Yeah. Same, in all honesty. In fact, I'm sure I went with my mom or dad to see it because, you know, they were also big fans of Jim Carrey.
And this movie kind of sparked a new culture known as reality television.
Yeah, it's I don't know if it didn't create it per se, but it predicted it.
In 2008, so 11 years after this movie came out, Popular Mechanics named The Truman Show as one of the 10 most prophetic science fiction films out there to predict the future.
That'd be an interesting list all around.
Yeah, the top 10.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because what's number one?
I'm not sure, but it because of things like Big Brother and Survivor.
Yeah, no, it absolutely did predict sort of the rise and the insanity that is reality television. Things like the 2008 writers' strike, one of the big writers' strikes that they did recently, or around that time, also kind of helped create reality television because all of a sudden they needed TV, they needed content, because that strike went on for so long. They needed content, but they couldn't have writers, and thus... there's a lot of things that were the catalyst at the beginning of reality TV, but The Truman Show definitely showed it at its best and worst.
I mean, MTV had The Real World.
Yeah, Real World had been around for a hot minute. I'm trying to think of what other reality TV shows there were. I mean, maybe to an extent, like Unsolved Mysteries.
No, it's not the same.
No, it's not the same.
It's still a scripted show where they...
Yeah, but they're basing it off of real people.
Sure, but...
Because,
reality television is having just a regular schmuck like you and me go on a show and just be ourselves.
Yeah.
That's what The Truman Show is.
Yeah.
Unknown to him. Most reality show contestants know they're on a show.
We can get into the morality of reality TV shows later. Why don't you go ahead and give me all the details on The Truman Show?
Well, The Truman Show was directed by Peter Weir and released in 1998, like we said. Peter Weir also directed Gallipoli from 1981. It was a Mel Gibson movie.
Okay.
It was a movie. I've seen it. It's really good. Because they're back then, well, not back then in 1981, but back when I was younger, I was really into war movies.
Yeah.
Especially things like Saving Private Ryan. World War II always got a lot of great films made about it.
Do you think that's because your dad was also into it? Because my dad,
how much
my dad
war movies
was into war movies, but he was more into like old comedies, and so that's why I'm aware of a bunch of old comedies. Like, Dad dictated what we watched, so we had to kind of frame. We learned humor around his point of view, I think, right? Like, because at least in my house, my dad was sort of in charge of what we watched, and he was always, if we wanted to watch something that he didn't, he'd bitch about it and make fun of it. And put it down.
My dad wasn't really into war films.
Yeah.
My like for war films, I think it was started because I liked action films, and war films were like a classier action film, a historical, and because they wanted to keep it historical, it had to be a little classier. Mm-hmm. It couldn't just be a guy with a minigun, massive muscles, just mowing down people like in Rambo or Commando or Predator or something like that. You had real live human beings, mostly like Americans.
Real stakes, basically.
Yeah, and you get a little history along with it, even though sometimes they go beyond history. But Gallipoli itself was a World War I film that they, at the time, didn't really make a lot of. And it's about the Australian conflict, or it's about two Australians being thrust into the war in Turkey.
I literally have never heard of this movie until this
I was
moment
introduced
right
to it by a friend when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And I've only seen it once, but I remember really liking it and being happy that finally somebody made a World War I movie.
Yeah.
Even though there are plenty of them out there.
There are, but they're not as prevalent.
Not as good. Not all of them are great. Some of them recently have been really good. He also directed The Mosquito Coast from 1986. That's a Harrison Ford and River Phoenix and Helen Mirren movie.
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
Heard of it, never seen it. I would like to because I like
Good
all those people. Dead Poet Society with Robin Williams from 1989. And then one movie that I know he directed, Maggie, that I know you like, is Master and Commander from 2003 with Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany and Billy Boyd.
Billy Boyd. Yes, I do have a weird and unabided love for Master and Commander because I went to see it because I knew that Billy Boyd was going to be in it.
Right.
That was 100% the main reason I went to see that movie because I was like, Pippin!
I know that's why. And we didn't even know each other.
No.
You've told me that before. And
yeah. God, I haven't seen that movie in so long.
Same.
Do you
but
watch
it's
it?
really good. We always say we want to watch a movie. I would love to watch Master and Commander.
Yeah, it's a great movie. It's got really no plot, but it's a great movie.
Yeah, they sail here and then they sail there.
Things happen.
And then they sail back over there.
Yeah.
And they're on Galapagos Island for a moment. I think it was Galapagos Island.
No, it was.
And then they sail again.
Yeah.
And then that's the end.
And the lesser of two weevils.
Which, because I work at a grocery store, and anytime I open up a box of sweet potatoes, there's always a little card in the sweet potato box that says that they're certified. No.
Oh.
It's certified weevil free.
Wow.
And anytime I see the word weevil, I instantly think of that scene in Master and Commander.
Yeah.
Truman Show was written by Andrew Niccol. He wrote and directed Gattaca.
Oh.
With Ethan Hawke
in 1997.
Neither have I.
Yeah.
I just know Gattaca, and that's it. Jude Law, Uma Thurman. Again, great cast. Would love to see it someday. I know you like this one. He wrote The Terminal.
Oh, yeah.
With Tom Hanks and Catherine Zeta-Jones.
It's such a bad movie, but I have such a soft place in my heart for The Terminal. Like, it's definitely not one of Tom Hanks' even top 20. But I love it so much.
Andrew Niccol also wrote and directed Lord of War with Nicolas Cage from 2005. I saw that movie once. It was...
I might have seen parts of it.
It's fine. A lot of people liked it.
2005?
Yeah.
That's definitely a movie that came to us via Netflix in the mail.
The one scene that I can even think of when it comes to Lord of War is it shows a bullet being made, shipped, loaded, and shot all in one single. The camera is like locked on the bullet the entire time. So you see it pass from person to person, loaded in a gun, and then shot through somebody's head.
Huh.
Yeah. And that's like the intro. And it's the only thing that stuck with me with that movie.
Interesting. You said Nick Cage?
Yeah.
That's about right. For that time of year?
Yeah, 2005. Now we get to the music of the movie.
Which?
No.
Choices.
I did not care for the music.
Choices were made.
There was like a main running theme throughout, which was fine.
Like the Truman theme.
The Truman theme.
Yeah.
It was a fine theme, especially when he's like stopping buses and cars with his hands.
Yeah.
Like Chris Pratt in Jurassic World.
With the Velociraptors?
With the Velociraptor, now it's cars. Burkhard von Dulwitz did the music for Truman Show. He has 55 projects under his belt since 1985.
Okay.
But when I was looking through the list, the Truman Show was the only thing I recognized.
A lot of European stuff, maybe?
I think so.
Yeah.
Television, just nothing that really caught my eye or ear. Because, the soundtrack in this...
It is...
It's just like some...
choices.
Some drums.
Yeah,
some
like...
Some...
Yeah, some weird horns.
Yeah, it was...
It was just... It was so distracting in the scene where, like, Truman's starting to realize that the world around him might not be real, and he's kind of running around town center. And I felt like the music was so loud, it was distracting. And it was just this,
I mean,
the tempo and the sound of the music
I wonder if
did not fit the scene that it was in.
I wonder if there's a difference between the music that he did while we're watching the Truman Show and the music that was done like on the keyboard for the actual Truman Show TV show, where you see a person actually playing a keyboard.
Which both of the composers were there doing that music. Like, that's them. Of course, whenever you see somebody playing the music, it's one of the composers.
I looked him up as an actor, and he didn't have any acting credits, but I could see him being unlisted or
cameo. Yeah, the Truman Show at least had two composers on it, not necessarily listed or credited, but not only did it have what was that dude's name again?
The main guy who's credited for music was Burkhard von Dalwitz.
Yes, and famed composer Philip Glass, who has done like The Hours and The Illusionist, was a part of the music department of this movie. So like, and he also appeared on screen as one of the composers for the Truman Show. The show itself.
The show itself. Moon, the moon base.
Yeah, he's playing the piano. So yeah, at least it's got some good music pedigree. I still don't like the music.
No, the music was lacking, and
it kind of distracting.
It kind of felt like filler. We've talked about before how they we'll just put this in for now and come up with something later, and then in the end they're like,
it was really 90s. Like, if you think about it, that was really kind of a 90s thing to do, was have the music be big and loud and kind of overpowering in that sort of like weird drum way.
Yeah.
Right? Like a lot of 90s scores kind of sounded like that. Whereas I think that people like Hans Zimmer started to take music and craft it more towards the story and not necessarily just be... Well, no, I guess composers have always been doing that. Look at John Williams. But still, I'm just saying that like the 90s movies soundtracks always had those like big weird sounds. We've moved on from that.
We have, thankfully.
Yes.
There's 90s music that just still is fantastic.
Yeah, but, there is. And those are the ones we remember. I did not remember the music for the Truman Show.
Yeah, there's nothing memorable about it. Like, you start hearing the main Truman theme, and you're like, all right, that's nice, but I'm not going to remember it.
Yeah.
It's not going
to stick with me the way that, like, the music from Jurassic Park will.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
The cinematographer was Peter Biziou? Biziou?
Okay.
Biziou? Peter Biziou?
Busy
Peter. Peter Busy. Biziou.
Cinematography is fine.
It was fine. Another guy who's worked forever, 1965. He helped work. He was the cinematographer for Monty Python's Life of Brian, 1979, and Time Bandits from 1981. Pink Floyd's The Wall from 1982.
You know what? This makes sense because the cinematography in this movie is kind of weird. You and I both went, it's fine. But if you think about it in terms of it being a TV show, it's so spot on.
It's all the weird places a hidden camera has to be.
Yes, and all the ways that, especially the technology in the late 90s, we know what a camera that small could capture, which would be kind of a fisheye-esque lens.
Right.
No, that's actually
small cameras
good
like
for Peter Biziou. We're sorry you're pronouncing your name wrong, sir.
I'm going to say Biziou, like kazoo.
Okay.
Peter Biziou.
Like, because when you think about it in terms of what the TV show is, it's pretty brilliant.
He also did cinematography for Mississippi Burning with Gene Hackman and Willem Dafoe.
That's a sandwich right there.
And then Ian McKellen's Richard III.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, it's been working since 1965. And we don't often talk about editors in our talks. That's like my next... I'm starting, actors, when you first get into movies, actors are definitely like the easy one. Then you start looking into like directors and composers.
And writers.
For sure. And then like cinematographers is like your next step into like, I like that cinematographer.
into like really true movie nerd.
Yeah, getting into that
like really sinking in.
Kind of like, really sinking in. I think editor is like the next step that I don't know if I'm ready for.
All right.
But that being said, and because we do this podcast, we start hearing names a lot.
Yeah.
The editor for The Truman Show was done by Lee Smith, who's Christopher Nolan's go-to guy for a lot of his movie editing.
Oh, okay. I can see it.
Yeah.
Like, if this movie hadn't have been made by Peter Weir in the end, because Peter Weir was, as far as I'm aware, kind of one of those directors that did specific things, went away for a bit, came back, knocked out another fucking banger. You look at his list and it's banger after banger after banger. So, like, one of the, kind of like Christopher Nolan, who takes his time to craft something beautifully and purposefully and put it out, instead of like Michael Bay, who just started, throwing poop at the walls and just
this one works.
Harder, faster, and
That one
harder.
didn't work. Let's try this one.
Yeah.
No, that one didn't work. Let's try this
Versus,
one.
so like,
that one kind of worked.
So my point of all of this is that I feel like if this movie had have been made today, Christopher Nolan would make it. This is a Christopher Nolan movie without Christopher Nolan. Couldn't you see Christopher Nolan taking on this type of story?
It is weird enough that I could see it being done, but it would be done so different.
Oh, it'd be so different. And it would be 4.5 hours long.
Oh, boy. You're right, because they would have started at birth, showing you the birth, showing him growing up, showing him lose his father, like every single beat.
It would have been
growing
every
up.
single beat.
And it might like go back and forth. Like
Yeah.
he's old, he's young, he's middle-aged, he's a baby.
The weird montages. Like, it would be somewhere, some multiverse has that version, but I don't know if it's well received there. Or if it's like Tenet and it's only really for like the main. Like,
or it's all done backwards.
oh, fuck you.
It's like the Memento.
He would.
Truman Show Memento style.
Oh my God, now I kind of want to watch Christopher Nolan's Truman Show.
The Truman Show was certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes with a 94% from critics and an 89% from audiences.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty great movie.
It was made for $60 million.
Wow.
Which is such a small amount of money now.
I mean, like
thinking about it.
Now, yes. In
Sure,
1997.
Yeah.
It came out in 98, so like 96, 97 when they started to develop it. That's a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. And it ended up making $264 million worldwide.
Damn.
That was a successful movie.
Damn.
Critically.
Yeah.
Financially.
Commercially.
Yeah. It won awards, but not any Oscars. It was nominated for 3 Oscars in 1999. Ed Harris for Best Supporting Actor.
Yeah.
Best Director, Peter Weir. And then Best Original Screenplay, Andrew Niccol.
How do you not give it to Jim Carrey for Best Actor?
I know. He did a phenomenal job.
I think he won the Golden Globe, right?
I didn't look up the Golden Globe.
He might have won the Golden Globe for it.
Just so you know, what they were up against that year.
Yeah.
Best Supporting Actor went to James Coburn for Affliction. Affliction was a movie with Nick Nolte and Sissy Spacek. Affliction is about a deeply troubled small-town cop who investigates a suspicious hunting death while other events jeopardize his sanity.
God, I don't remember that at all. Jim Carrey won in 99. He won Best Performance by an Actor in a Motion Picture Drama. So, and Ed Harris got, the Golden Globe. Yeah, it won for Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor for Jim Carrey and Ed Harris.
That's great.
So, yeah, it did definitely win some awards. And Jim Carrey...
For sure won awards.
Jim Carrey deserved it in terms of the Oscar, I think. He should have been nominated because it's an incredible performance.
Yeah, I'm surprised, especially after winning a Golden Globe.
Yeah, you'd think...
all the nominations are kind of
out
at the same time, but Truman Show won 40 awards across across the board, but no Oscars. Steven Spielberg won Best Director for Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, well, you're not gonna.
So yeah, it's as good of a movie as Truman Show was.
Nothing's going up against Saving Private Ryan and winning. Speaking of war movies, yikes.
And then the original screenplay went to Shakespeare in Love, which I think Shakespeare in Love won Best Picture that year too.
Yes, upsetting the Save It Private Ryan thing. And I have seen Shakespeare in Love a couple of times. I have not seen it in 20 plus years, but I remember not liking it. I remember just kind of being bored by it and just not understanding the point. And as much as sometimes I love Gwyneth Paltrow's terrible British accent, other times I can't stand it. And that's definitely a movie where I could not stand Gwyneth Paltrow trying to be British. There was just something so unconvincing about her in that role. But I think she won an Oscar for it, so who am I to say?
I think, we can get into the cast. Other than Jim Carrey, I think Laura Linney did a great job in this movie.
Laura Linney carries this fucking movie. She carries it.
Fantastic. Especially at the end where she's just like, I can't work under these conditions.
Yeah. Are you going to do something? I think she screams out at one point. She is so good as that psychotic 50s housewife who has an underlying agenda.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Because that's what her role is she has to be the doting wife, the perfect wife. Everything in the Truman Show is very 50s coded. I don't know if you kind of clock that in terms of the costumes.
The costumes for sure, the vehicles.
The vehicles and sort of the way of life, right? It's not that women were, subjected to being at-home moms.
I think it's because he grew up in the 50s and they didn't bother
they didn't change it with the times.
They didn't change the
much.
buildings or the vehicles that were already in there.
To keep him in that mentality.
The only thing that changed was some of the product placement that they had to do for their show.
Well, yeah, but I just mean that, I feel like because we idealize the 50s, right? And that was, a time when America had its shit together, although it didn't. And look, from the outside looking in, it was perfect. It's the American dream. It's the nuclear family. It's the cars, the styles, everybody's so happy in their roles and nobody questioned anything and nobody fought anything. Yeah. Women were housewives and the milkman was there.
Everything looked perfect.
And so that's why I think that, and the small town mentality, right, fits so well with the 50s mentality that I think that's why they kept him in that world to keep it safe. Right? It didn't change. It was always safe. So he didn't question, anything. There was no counterculture in the 50s. There was, but it wasn't mainstream.
It wasn't mainstream.
So I think that's what I took from watching this movie and the style and the set design and the costumes and everything. I took that extra layer of the 50s is a safe time and the 50s in a small town is a safe time. So you never question it and want to yearn for more because they're constantly trying to keep him at home.
Happy and satisfied.
Not
wanting, at home, not wanting to leave. Mm-hmm. The amount of times they have to point around to, why would anybody want to leave this place? This is perfect.
Yeah, right? He mentions going on airplanes, and then half an hour later, there are all these news reports about how flying on airplanes is dangerous.
Has a poster in the travel agency.
Yeah, this could happen to you.
This could happen to you. Oh boy.
The amount of manipulation that's in this film, it really is a classic. It has been studied in colleges, according to the Wikipedia article on The Truman Show, which, by the way, definitely reads, the plot itself is kind of written more as a story than, a basic plot outline. It's interesting. But it talks about how The Truman Show has been analyzed as an exploration of simulated reality, existentialism, surveillance, meta-philosophy, privacy, and reality television, and it has been described as a genre blending work that features elements of dystopian fiction, metafiction, psychological drama, romantic comedy, satire, and science fiction. And that's what it is. This movie is an incredible piece of art, and the way that it reflects on society both in the 90s and almost 30 years later, it's incredible. This movie's incredible.
In Jim Carrey's world, Truman's world, Truman Burbank, which is funny.
Yeah, because it's totally set in or around Burbank.
Well, not just...
No, it was on the other side of the mountain, so it was in the valley.
No, if you look at a map of where the Hollywood sign is, and where the big sphere building is, so big that you can see it from space.
Yes.
It not only is it part of it on the actual mountain where the Hollywood sign is, but then it keeps going all the way back, which is where Burbank is.
Damn.
So his town of
Sea Haven
is essentially what Burbank was. And
we'll just name the city. We'll name them after the city that we destroyed to create this. Could you imagine something that big in reality?
No, absolutely.
Could you imagine?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
The Great Wall of China is is fascinating enough.
It
The
is not
fact-
visible from space.
You know, I've heard that, but I've never been to space.
I mean, like, I'll believe it until I see it.
Exactly. Earth is flat. We never went to the moon. Noah Emmerich, I think, is the only other character that I recognized who's part of Truman's world.
Dude, okay, when you're ready, I've got an absolute insane quote about his character.
Let's do it because we're going through the list, and it is a big cast, even though
It's a big cast, but it's a small
But it's
cast.
a small cast.
Yeah. So Noah Emmerich, who plays the best friend,
yep.
Lewis Coltrane.
Which, what a name.
Yeah. Playing Marlin. So Marlin's the name of the character on the Truman Show, but Lewis Coltrane is the actor in real
who's
life.
playing
right?
Marlin.
And he has said, Noah Emmerich said, "My character is in a lot of pain. He feels really guilty about deceiving Truman. He had a serious drug addiction for many years, been in and out of rehab. Very little of this is shown in the finished film, but several deleted scenes depict Lewis actively expressing guilt over Truman's situation, and in one sequence he spots Truman during his escape and purposely says nothing."
That's weird because
For me,
you don't see that at all in the movie.
At all, right? So that's just how he played the character, playing the character.
He
right?
wanted some motivation.
Serious drug addiction and been in and out of rehab. But also, there are a couple times where Truman mentions, like, his friend being in the hospital for the month or taking the summer off to go do something outside
that was when he was
town.
a kid.
Right?
I understand the one where he left town for a bit, but when he gets pneumonia for a month, he was a kid.
But
so I doubt. But
if you're, I mean, he was
a child actor,
but he was a child actor at 7, deceiving this other child. So, and they're not now like 30. So
30,
for over 20, about 23 years, this human being has been lying to his supposed best friend. I'm just saying. I mean, Drew Barrymore started drinking early. Like, who's to say?
I mean, every time he visits Truman, he's got a 6-pack.
Yeah, he's always drinking beer. It's nuts.
So am
I read
Cheers.
that and I was like, oh shit, that is... Somehow this movie is so layered that you don't even know all of it just watching it. It's
a PG
nuts.
movie,
That's
and there's this
also
whole
crazy.
there's this underlying PG-13, even R, to it.
Yes.
Like there's a scene where Ed Harris really is gunning for a live conception.
Yes.
For this Truman's child.
Because he wants to then raise Truman's child the same way he raised Truman.
Right.
And so, like, continuing the series, he's literally trying to birth the sequel. And he wants television's first live conception?
It's a very dark version of this movie. Nolan would have made this rated R for sure.
Also, not to mention that his wife is an actress who agreed to and is being paid to be this man's wife. And thus mother. She's
been picked to mother his child.
She's prostituting herself.
Later we learn that she's about to leave Truman.
Well, yeah, but that's because of all
the stuff that's happening. She
and
can't work under these conditions.
because she broke character. So she probably got fired.
People who get broke character, of course they do. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they have to be.
But she's essentially prostituting herself in front of the nation.
Right.
For this whole lie. And that unto itself is crazy and something that could be debated in like classrooms on college campuses.
And then they replace her with another woman. Who's just like...
who's there to do the same thing.
All right, here we go.
It is not true. They are literally... They don't even allow this man to have true love.
No, they pick the people. Even though he sees, we meet her later, a little middle into the show, but...
Yeah, he falls in love with an extra.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter because...
She's like, I'm not supposed to talk to you.
Christoph has picked Truman's lover.
Yeah.
And that's insane.
Insane.
And Laura Linney does a great fucking job.
Laura Linney does a great job. Ed Harris, I think he did really well. I don't think I ever watched Affliction, so I can't say exactly what James Coburn's performance was in that movie to win supporting actor, but I can't say Ed Harris was necessarily putting on a Oscar-worthy performance in this movie. He does very well, and there's some touching moments, some really heated moments, and he does a good job. But I've seen better Ed Harris performances.
Well, so
like I'll just throw out The Abyss is probably my favorite Ed Harris movie. He is amazing in that movie, and I love.
So
my favorite.
Dennis Hopper was originally in the role.
James Cameron movie. Anyway, yes.
Dennis Hopper was
Dennis
originally
Hopper.
cast as Kristoff.
I could see that.
But he was fired after 2 days.
No, Dennis Hopper.
Because Weir and producer Scott Rudin had made a deal that if they could not improve of Hopper's performance, they would replace him.
Improve?
Yeah.
Man, that's harsh.
Yes.
I wonder what he was doing. I would love to see that footage.
Yeah, you're curious, right? What it would be.
Yeah, because like. Dennis Hopper's an amazing actor, and I wonder how he played the character. Probably completely different
insane.
Than what they wanted.
Yeah, a little less Christ-like and maybe a little more Christ-like.
There was so much Christ-like stuff with Ed Harris.
Maybe a little less. Maybe Hopper was playing it a little more like Willem Dafoe as Christ versus like Jim Caviezel as Christ, which is what Ed Harris kind of did, if that makes any sense.
The one part that made me laugh a lot was when Ed Harris finally talks to Jim Carrey, and Jim Carrey's like, "Who are you?" And he's like looking up the sky at the sun, and you just hear, "I am the creator of this show."
Oh, God, I hope that's what actual God sounds like. Is Ed Harris actually God? But anyways, a number of actors were approached to replace Hopper, but a lot of people turned it down until Harris agreed. Huh. And Harris only had like 3 days to prep for the role. Harris considered making Kristoff a hunchback, but Weir did not take to that idea.
Wow, hunchback. Why?
Because he wanted Kristoff to be bitter about his own upbringing, and thus he gives Truman the perfect upbringing, since he couldn't have it himself.
Interesting.
Yes. Once you like, watching this movie is one thing, right? Sitting down, if you've never seen The Truman Show, and you sit down and you watch this movie, and it's an incredible film. Like, you come out of it thinking one thing, and then the second you start deep diving into, like, the lore of The Truman Show, shit gets crazy. I mean, like, Peter Weir wrote pages of backstory for the characters.
Of course he did.
And I want to know what that backstory is. Like, I want to know so much more about The Truman Show, to the point where I almost want a sequel, like, you know, a sequel which is a documentary looking back on it 30 years later and what has become of all of these people. Because, like, the legal ramifications, the therapeutic ramifications, the societal ramifications of Truman walking out that fucking door, like, I want to know what happens. And I probably never will. But I think it would be fascinating, or it would be terrible and ruin all of it, which I guess is the fear more than anything.
I completely forgot that Paul Giamatti is in this movie, and it was probably because I could only watch movies like this, you know, PG, some PG-13 movies in the mid to late 90s. This was probably the first movie I ever saw him in, looking at his IMDb page and everything he did. Eventually, I would watch a couple other movies that he did before The Truman Show, which were Private Parts with the shock jock.
Oh, Howard Stern?
Howard Stern.
God, I only ever saw that once.
Me too.
But I saw it at a young age because my parents didn't care if we watched rated R movies.
And I had to wait till I was in my 20s to watch Private Parts.
Yes, and I saw it as a teenager.
Same thing with...
And I very vividly remember the scene where the woman sits on the speaker and he, like, blows into it to help produce. Yeah.
Because...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I saw that as a young kid.
It's fantastic.
Swear to God, my life.
And then the other movie that I probably saw him in, even though he played FBI technician, at least in Private Parts, he has a named character, Kenny, in Donnie Brasco with Al Pacino and Johnny Depp.
I didn't see that until I was older.
Same.
But it was because I did not care to.
Well, same. I mean,
mob movies and me have never been... I just don't care about mob movies.
I like mob movies, but Donnie Brasco is very dramatic.
It's very dark.
And slow and dark, sure. and very rated R and boring for
Yeah.
a kid in his late teens.
Yes.
So even if I could watch it in 1997 when it came out, I'd probably be so bored of it.
Yeah.
But I have seen it, I think, twice in my 20s.
Yeah.
But not since my 20s.
Yeah. Is it
So-
something you'd go back to?
I'd probably check it out again because I love late 90s Al Pacino.
Yeah. No, that
I
was
even
when,
love late 90s.
Yeah, that's when they both were better.
They were better actors back then.
Before Johnny Depp got oversaturated and just turned into a wine-soaked asshole.
Yeah.
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 I just can't with him anymore. There's a lot of reasons, but the main reason is just that for a while he was everywhere and he was doing the same shtick, and it just wore so thin that I don't need to see it again for like 30 more years.
There's a lot of Johnny Depp movies where he doesn't show a lot of range.
No.
And it's just the same Johnny Depp over and over.
Yeah.
And then you used to get fun things like Pirates of the Caribbean.
Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, flawless film.
Some of his indie stuff and some of his weirder
Benny
stuff.
and June, flawless
Benny
film.
and June is great.
But like, kind of with Alice in Wonderland and onward, I just couldn't do it anymore. And to the point where now when I see him, my whole skin just goes, ugh.
Yeah. Harry Shearer is in this one.
For a second.
I could tell it was him almost immediately because he does a lot of the narration at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of like the voiceover guy who talks and gives you a lot of exposition throughout the beginning of the movie. And I've been watching ever since Disney Plus got a hold of, which I guess was at launch, right? They had The Simpsons.
Yeah.
I've been watching Simpsons episodes almost nightly.
Yeah.
And have watched the entire series twice through.
Yes.
And then
but
now
by
working,
watched, I mean you've slept
I
through.
sleep through a lot.
But probably half of it.
If you do the math, I figure enough times watching it, I will have watched everything.
Yes.
Eventually.
I have also watched a lot of The Simpsons because I end up leaving it on while you fall asleep. And just like 2 episodes will go by while I wait to make sure that you're like asleep. And then I finally turn it off. And that's when you wake up and yell at me for turning it off.
Why'd
because
you turn it off?
You weren't sleeping that whole time, even though you were snoring loudly. But whatever.
Right. Once it turns off, I wake up. Gotta leave it on. Anyway, he has a very familiar voice.
Yes.
And as soon as you hear it, you're just like, here.
We
Philip Baker Hall, I'm guessing, is probably a studio head.
Mm-hmm.
He's definitely in a
character
position.
actor.
He's in a position higher than Christoph.
Yes.
And kind of, he's a character actor that's been around forever. And whenever I see him, I'm like, oh, that guy. Because I won't remember that his name is Philip Baker Hall next time I see him. And as I'm looking down the IMDb page, I see now we got Philip Glass as the keyboard artist, and then John Pramick, who also did a keyboard artist. So the main composer probably wasn't in the background in the movie, but
We also can't forget. We need to mention Natasha Malcarone because she is one of the most beautiful women on this planet. Absolutely stunning, great character actress who was kind of prevalent in the late 90s, early 2000s, although she's done a lot of stuff since then. And she's just stunning. And every time I see her in something, I am never failed to just be completely like hard eyes for her. Just like Truman. You know, she's the love interest. She's the one that Truman's truly in love with. Although, like, he looked at her twice. You know, he doesn't even know her as a person. But anyways, that's neither here nor there.
she was a main character in David Duchovny's Californication.
Mm-hmm. She was the wife. Ex-wife.
She's also a main character in the Halo series on Amazon. Which, as soon as I saw her on Halo, I was just like, I know her,
Yes.
but I don't know where. And I think it was probably more than anything. I mean, I did watch the first 2 seasons of Californication, and
The only thing I really truly remember about Californication is when he was, had his daughter for the weekend and she started her period and he didn't know what to do. And so that's kind of the only scene I remember of that show. I went through my David Duchovny phase as a young woman, as a young, 7th to like 10th grader of my X-Files obsession. I can't say I've really truly enjoyed David Duchovny in a whole lot since then. You know, I
Fair.
tried to watch Californication. It just wasn't my jam, right? Like,
I think you got enough of David Duchovny in your
Yes.
life through
Although-
all the X-Files you watched.
and the movie Return to Me with
Return
Minnie
to Me
Driver,
is
which
such
is
a good movie.
Such a good fucking movie.
If you haven't seen Return to Me,
Oh my god, it's such a perfect romantic dramedy. It's
fantastic.
It's so good. It
It's
makes
so
me cry
feel
every
good
time.
Every time.
Oh, it is so feel good. Oh my god. Yeah. No, Return to Me is a perfect film. Oh man, now I want to watch that too.
So some parallels have been drawn to an old book from 1516,
Wow.
right? It's from an author named Thomas More. The book is called Utopia. More describes an island which only one entrance and only one exit. Only those who belonged to this island knew how to navigate their way through the treacherous openings safely and unharmed. The situation is similar to the Truman Show because there are limited entryways into the world that Truman knows. Truman does not belong to this utopia into which he has been implanted, and childhood trauma rendered him frightened of the prospect of ever leaving the small community. Utopian models of the past tended to be full of like-minded individuals who shared much in common compared to Moore's utopia and real-life groups such as the Shakers and the Oneida community. It is clear that the people in Truman's world are like-minded in their common effort to keep him oblivious to reality. The suburban picket fence appearance of the show's set is reminiscent of the American Dream of the 1950s.
Yeah, see.
And the American Dream concept in Truman's world serves as an attempt to keep him happy and ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's, it's a very Stepford Wives-esque ideal, right? Like, if you keep them sheltered and stupid, then
Also-
they'll behave.
it also reminds me all that. I mean, there's been 1,000 utopia type or happy and ignorant
Yeah.
type movies where just go about your business, don't talk to anybody, don't break up anything.
Yeah.
Everything's fine. Don't
Which-
point out the
Elephant in the room.
yeah, that's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
You got something like The Island
Mm-hmm.
that we were talking about recently, where if you just stick to what you're supposed to do, you'll be fine. Even though you won't, because they'll take you into a room and harvest your organs. And then the
I
other
like
one,
The Giver.
the other movie that I just thought of was, which also has to do with that 1950s American Dream, was
Pleasantville?
Pleasantville. Yes.
Fuck, Pleasantville's a good movie.
God, you read my mind.
Fuck.
All I could see was black and white and slowly turning into color. And I was just like, I can see the actors and it's named. And then you said Pleasantville.
Well,
read my mind.
great minds and longtime loves.
We've seen a lot of movies too.
Pleasantville's a great fucking movie.
It is.
Like, and that too was a 90s movie. It's about, the idyllic 50s mentality kind of keeping you down, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about it too, even today, you and I both know people, both together and separate, who are so ignorant of the world around them because they don't want to be a part of it. And so they just try to ignore it. They try to ignore the politics of the day, all the horrible things. And then
Or they move somewhere so far away from all the actual troubles that they don't see that there are troubles.
yeah, because
And
like they
then
want to just ignore
They want to ignore everything and just live
And
their
live in
happy
their
life.
little
and
happy
their
lives,
their
their
ignorant
bubbles. Yeah.
bubble, just like Truman.
And then, once you break out of that mentality, it's a sick, sad world that everybody else is like, why are you breaking out? Anyways, so, this movie is crazy layered with a lot of shit. Like, it is so,
Oh, yeah.
it has never not been relevant.
It's a very simple story.
Yes.
Very simple
It's
concept.
a timeless story.
Yeah, because we all, whether you tell it, you can tell it one way, you can tell it this way.
Mm-hmm. You could tell it for laughs, you could tell it for horror, you could
Right.
tell it for... I mean, this movie very easily could have been a goofy comedy, especially with Jim Carrey in it.
Right.
This movie very easily could have been, a rated R horror film. Like,
I mean,
there's so much that this story is, with its simple basis of, what if the one man in the world who didn't realize that he was living in a fake reality found out? Because everybody on this planet knows that Truman knows who Truman is. But Truman just knows his own world. So watching him break out of that, like, if this movie didn't exist, that TV show would be airing right now. And you and I know it.
Oh.
The kid would be maybe 6 years old, maybe 10.
You know, and that's the thing. Like,
but if this movie hadn't come first, it would have happened.
I think the one thing that's preventing that are human rights. Mm-hmm. I mean, the government, I'm surprised with this, what happens in this story. Like, they even mentioned that Truman was the first legal adoption by a company.
Yeah.
Like, how is that? A corporation
owns a child.
That's right. How is that legal?
Yeah.
I mean, in that world, obviously it is,
and
because
then
they said legal.
The ramifications of paying people to lie to this child.
Even convincing another
an
7-year-old to tell,
yes.
to lie to that child.
Like, like I said, that's why I want like a 30 years after the Truman Show documentary of what happened after he walked out that door. Because I want to know, did the government ever step in? Like, what happens if this is a real thing and he becomes self-aware?
Another movie that reminds me of this 1950s style American dream where people live ignorantly in their bubble.
Yeah.
And it also has Jim Carrey in it, was The Majestic. Which
I remember watching The Majestic, and that's all I can say about it.
2001 and also rated PG. This one's much longer at 2.5 hours.
Wasn't it about like communists in the 50s?
Yeah, it's essentially Jim Carrey plays a blacklisted Hollywood writer.
Yeah.
He gets in a car accident, so he loses his memory. So you could kind of connect that to Truman, who doesn't have a memory of the outside world.
Yeah.
And he settles down in a small town in the 50s. And the small town looks very much like
Sea Haven.
Sea Haven. You know, it is the 50s in the movie, so it's not like they're stuck in the 50s. It is the 50s, but it definitely has that small town 50s vibe to it, obviously. And he's mistaken for a long lost at sea soldier, like a sailor who was thought of as dead and gone, but comes home and he looks enough like what their son would have looked like. So he's brought into this community and treated like one of them. And
like I said,
I
saw that movie, and that's the nicest thing I can say about it.
Jim Carrey, I think, does a fantastic job in The Majestic. I think you should watch it again. I think everybody should give The Majestic another chance.
You know, we could probably talk at length about the societal and political and emotional ramifications of this film, and we have given Jim Carrey his flowers and all of them, but watching him become self-aware was such an incredible thing. And as unfortunate as it is for the music to have kind of taken over the scene where he's, you know, he decides not to go into work and he goes into the other building and sees behind the scenes of the elevator, and I mean just all of that stuff, right? When he starts to become aware. It is so good.
It's very much like The Matrix.
Yes.
Or any, you know, when we were talking about Inception a few weeks ago, it was the same thing where the world you're in is not real.
Yes. And coming to terms with that.
And waking up to that and realizing that, and all the testing stuff, you know, walking into the building with the elevator and seeing people on their lunch break behind the wall. He broke the fourth wall. Yeah. I like when he runs out and smacks the guy on the ladder on the ass with his suitcase, and the guy kind of has a reaction, but he keeps it together enough that it's like as if it didn't happen at all.
I absolutely adore the scene where he gets Laura Linney in the car and drives off with her, and his reality is breaking, his brain is breaking a little bit, but the way that Laura Linney acts in that scene is so good. When she thinks that he's gonna like give up and go home, she gets this, like, you could see her face wash with relief.
Oh, thank God, we're just gonna go home.
And like you can see her visibly, like her whole body softens, like, okay, this is almost over. And then when he decides it isn't,
we're gonna try it again.
Yeah, it's just how tense she becomes, and she's phenomenal in this film. Like, she really does carry it from top to bottom. And I even did write down that I'd like to think that his bestie really does love him. And I wrote that down before I read the comments about how, Marlon, the best friend, was like the one guy who truly did care for Truman. Because, like, I don't know if his mom really does.
Doesn't seem like it.
She seems very distant.
She's always trying to, distant. She's always trying to.
She's doing the job as best she can. Yeah.
She's been told, this is your job. Keep him in line. Make him.
But raise him as a child, like.
I know.
But raise him.
Yeah.
But she couldn't love him because if she loved him, she wouldn't have let this thing happen to him.
Kind of like what his dad did.
Yeah.
His dad couldn't go further with it.
Yeah, because his dad, I think, truly developed love for this child.
So they had to write him off the show.
By killing him
off and having this
Truman see
young
it.
boy witness his father's death.
The
by
trauma
drowning.
they manipulate
we
into
see
his
his
life.
trauma by not being able to get on a ferry, not be able to get on a plane or even cross a bridge.
It's not even just that, though. It's like, the producers told his coworker to go tell him that he needed to go on the ferry, right? They were like, Truman needs to get on the ferry, knowing full well that Truman would not get on the ferry. And they even doubled that down by set dressing that scene with the boat in the water that's half drowned to prevent him from getting on the ferry, just to make him feel like he's better off at home.
Yeah, that half-sunken boat was...
Those levels of manipulation across the board, it's insane what they do to this guy. It's insane. If there was a rated R version of this movie, like the Rob Zombie version, where Truman turns around and murders all of these people...
It would have been justified.
It would have been justified. Because, like, the shit that Christoph does to Truman.
I would love to know what happens once he gets out.
I want that documentary.
Right? Like, I want to know that he got together with his...
Yeah, with Sylvia.
I would hope that he sues the fuck out of these people.
Oh, yeah, right?
Can you imagine 30 years of your life are all fake?
No. First of all, therapists would have been frothing at the gash to get a hold of Truman as a client. Because not only to help him, but also just to hear the tea, right? Like, could you imagine? It would have been an insane grab for a therapist to get fucking Truman Burbank. Secondly, he's a real human being who exists. Does he have a social security card? What rights does he have under, he was born under just the Bill of Rights. What rights does he have to have protected himself? He never gave consent to these people to do this to him.
No, I do appreciate, though, that I think there's a moment where somebody says that he could leave anytime he wants, even though they manipulate him into staying.
Well, but that's just it. I think Christoph says that to Lauren, the true love. He says he can leave when he wants, but that's sort of the same way as like that an abuser says, to his wife, you can leave whenever you want, knowing full well that she'll never get away from him. It's that narcissistic, controlling mentality of like, oh, absolutely, he can leave if he wants to, but we're not going to stopping him from leaving. We're going to put up a fight.
All the work they do, they almost drown him.
They almost drown him.
As he's trying to escape.
On live television.
Yeah.
And that scene where the dude says...
This is a guy that's being kept in this place against his will.
Yeah.
And
at one point, one of the studio execs says when they're trying to drown him, he says, we can't let him die in front of a live audience, to which Christoph just casually, almost coldly replies, he was born in front of a live audience.
Yeah.
That is an insane line. Because, like... okay, so here's my idea, right? 30 years later, and I realize that's only in a couple years, and I don't think that there's anything planned. So 35, 40 years. But I'm just saying, if they released a movie that was a quote-unquote documentary about what happened to Truman Burbank after he left, and I've already said this a couple times in this podcast, what happened after he left? Does he end up with Lauren? What about... Meryl and Marlon and all the character actors that were on the show and who lied to him, where did their lives end up? Was there any legal ramifications? What were the societal ramifications? What were Truman's personal ramifications of being there and then coming out into the real world and like discovering what America was in the late 90s. Like, I want that documentary so badly. And I think that's the only way you could do a sequel to this movie. But it's probably never going to happen, and that bums me out because I want to see it.
Use your imagination.
Fan fiction.
Another thing was the fact that Truman was chosen for this show.
Yeah.
Because there were a bunch of babies who were unwanted.
Unwanted pregnancies,
So, first of all, his life is already off to a rocky start by being an unwanted child.
Where are his parents?
They didn't want him. All the babies that were chosen for the show were unwanted.
Yeah, I know. But do you think that mom never regretted that as she watched this kid, A, watch this kid grow up, and B, or maybe they didn't know. Maybe they didn't know that's where the kid was going to go. But but B, looking at the revenue, you're right. They had to have.
They were filming.
Yeah. Inside the uterus.
The uterus.
So, like, how much was she paid? And did she get, like, residuals?
Oh, God.
Like, every year she got a certain amount because she pushed Truman out? Like,
but then also...
God, there are questions.
But then also, just the fact that the main reason he was chosen against all the other babies was because he was born
early.
First.
Yeah.
He was born on the production schedule timeline. He was born right when they wanted, essentially their pilot episode was already set on this date, and they needed one of these babies to be born by that date, and he was the one who did it.
Yeah, which is nuts. And also, like, when he was born, was he immediately given to the actress who would be his mom?
I think so.
And was she actually married to the dad?
No.
Or was that fake?
I think it was fake.
Is Truman Truman's marriage legal with Meryl? Are him and
probably not
Meryl like legally wed?
Probably not.
Like, it's bonkers.
This is why this hasn't happened.
Man, there's
a lot of reasons why
this movie is just so fucking good.
Yeah, something else that they want so much control over Truman. I'm surprised they taught him in school that there was more outside of Sea Haven. Like, you could have brought this kid up almost like
almost like The Village.
The Village,
yeah.
Right, exactly. Like, this is the world we live in, and there's nothing outside. Like, the ocean just goes on forever.
Do you think that would have given him more wanderlust or more questions?
He might have had more questions, but they could have found a way. I feel like they could have easily been like, this is...
Yeah, they never needed to teach him what Europe was.
No, why? Like, that just makes you want to go visit Europe. Or, I mean, the bad thing was, you got his love interest who was being taken away from him.
Yeah.
And and her father said, I'm taking her to Fiji. That was a bad part.
Yeah, that was literally just him improvising a line. Like, what's the furthest place I can think of in this
taking
second?
her to Fiji.
Yeah. And then this becomes this dude's obsession for 15 years.
Yeah, I need to find out where Fiji is and how I can get there.
God, that is...
But yeah, I just feel like, why teach him geography?
Yeah.
Why teach him that there's even America? Just be like, Sea Haven. This is the world we live in.
Yeah.
But things would have been so much different. It would have looked more of I feel like a tribal type.
Yeah, as
place.
opposed to just
like, where do cars come from? Where do buildings come from?
And that's probably why they had to teach him modern American history, just to explain what life was.
Sure.
Right? And then, but to spend all that time...
There was a nuclear accident that made Sea Haven the only existing, which is why we still drive these old cars. I don't know. I feel like there was a way around it, but it makes it more interesting this way for him to have a reason to leave.
That would have been darker.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe that's it. Maybe like there are so many ways that you could make this story so much worse than what it is. And I think that they had to keep a certain amount of levity to not lose sympathy and empathy for everybody involved, right? Because at a certain point you could be like, fuck, Laura Linney, fuck Nola Emmerich, like, fuck Kristoff, like, all these people are terrible, and really overly root for Truman, or watching it and being like, I kind of feel bad for Laura Linney's character, right? Like, she signed up for this gig, and she had to put herself out there the way she has to prostitute herself for how much money, for how much fame, right? Like this woman committed her entire life to this lie. She walked in knowingly doing that. And a part of me feels some empathy for her because of that. Because she was willing to bear his child and go the distance her entire life. That's insane.
That is a long con.
I mean, look at his best friend. They met at 7. And he signed on for his life at 7 years old.
Yeah, what kind of parents does he have? They're just
yeah.
Are they just collecting the paycheck until he was 18?
That's fucking nuts. And, I mean, again, this movie is just, it's so goddamn good. It's not that I forget that it's incredible, but I think that sometimes when I see people talk about it, or at least in the past, you know, people would like put this on their top 10 greatest movies of all time list. And there's always like, really? Like, is it? But watching it today, again, because this podcast has changed how I watch movies, and I have become more engrossed again, right? Like, I've become more in love with movies again. Not that I've never not been, but now I just enjoy movies so much more because of this silly podcast. When we went to see Twisters, there was no way I was not going to love Twisters. Yeah. But, like, I was watching it, and I was just so happy to be watching it and be a part of it and to watch a proper summer movie play across my eyeballs, you know, and I just had so much fun. And I think that a lot of that has to do with how much I love doing this.
Going back to the travel agent office when he's in there and he's waiting to speak to somebody, I always thought when the travel agent came out and she's wearing the bib that he caught her in the middle of lunch. And it wasn't until this viewing that I realized that they were rushing
it's a makeup
bib to get her makeup on for the scene.
To not, you know, so nothing gets on the costume.
Right.
Yeah.
It was great. It was just like one of those great, and she takes it off and just kind of hides it. But I love that kind of
I love
it.
all of the moments where the fourth wall gets broken.
Right.
You know,
the world
starts to slowly crumble.
The rain is just raining on him.
The light that falls. The rain that's just raining on him is so funny. You know, it gives you a chance to really appreciate Jim Carrey's physical humor in this movie.
Sure.
It's kind of the only chance you get to enjoy it. Yeah, the rain sequence makes me really happy. I would like to bring up really quick that going into this today, because Caveman had, you know, we've had plans around our day off, and so we watched the movie, we went out and ran a couple errands, and now we're here recording it. But I really thought this movie was longer than 2 hours. Like, I was sure this movie was, if not a solid 2 hours, then like a 2:15. It's an hour 43 with credits.
Yeah.
This movie
it moves.
Does not fuck around. It moves. It gets in and it gets the job done.
Some tight editing by
super tight editing
by Nolan's editor.
Yeah, like they do not waste time on anything unessential.
Which I gotta say, what happened, dude? Is Nolan in the room looking over your shoulder while you're editing?
It's nice that it's so short, right? Because it gives you the opportunity to just get engrossed and go on with your day.
I feel like in the 90s especially, there weren't a lot of commercial films.
Yeah, that were really long.
Were over 2 hours.
In fact, like I vaguely remember people being aghast at like the length of Titanic. You know, I remember people being like, a 2.5 hour movie. I even think that still people are a little like, 2.5 hours? That's insane.
I mean, 2001, when Fellowship of the Ring came out, that was just under 3 hours, the theatrical cut?
The theatrical cut of Fellowship of the Ring is just over 2.
Oh,
I think the longest one of the 3 is The Return of the King at like
3.5?
No, at like 2:47 or something like that.
They're short.
Yeah. Well, they're not short. I mean,
it's compared to the movies I'm watching.
But if you then take into account the theatrical versions, then they're all 3+ hours. The extended editions. But, you know, even then people were just like, that's a really long movie, but they've got a lot of story to tell. Okay. So you're right. Like the 90s movies were kept roughly to about 100 minutes. And like that's kind of what I love about this Truman Show, like about The Truman Show, is that it is a tightly told story, right? It gets in, it gets at it, and you get out. And I love that. Versus if Nolan had have made this film, the Nolan version of Truman Show would be 3 hours long. And you're right, we would have seen the birth. We would have seen moments of childhood joy and sorrow with, the best friend and Truman. Like, we would have seen so much more. And, like, I would love to see that version, but only once. Because it would probably be too much.
Cut.
Yeah.
Peter
the
Weir's
other director's cut. The guy who didn't even direct it. The Nolan cut of The Truman Show.
There's multiple audience people watching the show, and they're showing their perspective on a lot of them. We start at day 10,909, which is only 49 days away from 30 years. And then as I think we get up, before it ends, I think it goes to 10,912 or 13. It's like what happens from the beginning of the movie till the end was like at least 4 days, I think. But the audience members stay the same.
Yes.
Like they're watching this over the course of 3 to 4 days, but they never move. Yeah. Like the one guy's in the bath the entire time.
I love
the security
Bath Guy.
guards.
Bath Guy is my favorite.
Bath Guy's pretty great.
The security guards, of course.
Especially when during the boat scene.
Yeah, and he's like splashing, like he's holding on
to the shower
towel,
curtain or the towel. Yeah.
Survive, live. I love Bath Guy.
The two servers in the restaurant,
in the Truman bar.
The Truman bar,
so you'd go to a bar to watch the Truman Show,
and all they do is like talk about poor service because the serving staff is just watching the show. Yeah,
right. You're like, hey, can I get another vodka tonic? Hello, ma'am.
Shut up. We're watching the Truman Show.
And it has that one actress with the teeth, Olan Jones. She has been in a ton of things. She's a great character actress. She was in Mars Attacks. She was in Edward Scissorhands. She was in Beethoven with the Dog. She was in The X-Files. She's been in, just 1,000 things. But what I mean by the teeth, I mean that like her top teeth kind of like indent inward and her bottom teeth kind of go upward. So it's a little beak-like.
I recognize her now.
Yes. And every time I see her, I'm always like, her. And
Mars Attacks, I think, is what I recognize her from.
Yes. She's done a lot of things and always kind of like interesting, kind of like wacky characters. But she's one of the waitresses, and I've always kind of loved her in it because I've just always loved her as a character actress.
We have to get a young Scully.
Yes.
Joel McKinnon Miller.
From Brooklyn Nine-Nine, not X-Files.
Not that Scully.
Yeah.
Of course not.
And
that'd be weird.
Yeah. Like it's... I love the people and the two old lesbians that are sitting on the couch watching everything.
Holding the Truman pillow.
With the Truman pillow and wearing the same robe that Laura Linney wears, and because everything on the show is for sale.
Also, a little bit of not cultish. A little cultish. The production crew seemed a little cultish.
Yes, with their shirts that say "Love him and protect him."
Love him, protect him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though they, watch their creator try to drown him.
Yeah. What are you protecting him from? You're not.
I mean, just the way they treat Christoph, who, again, is the Christ-like character. It very is a cult and a religion. And Natasha McElrone's character plays, somebody who's a part of the Free Truman movement that's trying to, get him free, right, of this prison that he's been living in from second one. Of course that would exist in real life.
Well, the people who are sneaking into Christmas boxes or
trying to
parachuting from the top of the sphere.
How did he get in there
I don't know.
In the first place?
He found a hatch on the
parachute.
roof.
Yeah,
I don't know.
You base jumped, I guess.
Yeah, he base jumped to the top.
But it's just sort of it's nuts.
One other thing I wanted to talk about before we get to ratings was the ending. Specifically, the boat crashing into the wall.
Boat, yeah.
Because
what an iconic sequence.
And you can see it as soon as he's sailing, that shot is just in place, and you just see the boat going. And then if you look to the left, at first it looks like sky, but then you can see that thin ground going around the edge.
Yeah.
And then you just watch the mask, or not the mask.
The shadow of...
You just see it hit the wall. But that pool that they're shooting in is at Universal Studios.
Yeah, on the Universal lot.
Yeah, on the lot.
We have seen it a couple times doing the Universal tour.
Yeah, the tour.
Yeah.
It's the same. I mean, they use it in so many things.
Yeah, Titanic.
Apollo 13.
Yeah. The Evan Almighty movies.
Yeah.
Like, they've used, because it's a giant pool.
Yeah.
You know, with...
Not a swimming pool.
No.
It's just a big, almost tank, but it's just slightly above the level of the ground.
Yeah, like it's a giant in-ground pool, essentially, that they can put ships in.
And it looks, I think it's made out of cement.
Yeah. And then they've got a giant wall up against the side of it that they could matte paint or green screen.
Yeah. And I could just see them painting clouds and sky on it. And then there it is, and you just shoot it at a certain angle to make it look like it's a much bigger than it's supposed to be. But
I love the fact that they painted the stairs to also look like the sky, right? To give it the same perspective. Because that scene of him walking up the stairs in the clouded sky, I mean, what an iconic fucking scene.
Right.
Going back to the cinematography, going back to the directing. I mean, like, when I think of The Truman Show, I think of that, right? I think of that, or I think of the poster where it's a bunch of tiny little Jim Carreys that make up the big collage of Jim Carrey's face, right? That, you know, I guess there's a reason why this movie has existed in the pop culture for, 26 years now? Like, it's a great fucking iconic film. And, you know, like I said, it has been irrelevant every year since. You can still find something that is so deeply relevant and terrifying about The Truman Show.
so, Maggie, what would you give The Truman Show?
I love this movie. You know, it's definitely not like on my constant repertoire of movies that I'd watch. Like we probably watch this once every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. But every time I watch it, I'm happy to have seen it because it's just great. But there are some problems with it, namely the music. So I'm going to give it a 4. I'm going to give it a 4. 4.5? 4. I'm going to give it a 4. Because, I've been nothing but, just talking up how great this movie is. The music really kind of ruins the film for me. And maybe I'd love to see the Hans Zimmer version of, this film. But the music is so jarringly awkward that that's the only thing that really kills it for me. But unfortunately, it is such a big part of the film. So that's why I'm giving it a 4. Acting is top tier, directing is top tier, the writing is insane and so thought-provoking. I absolutely adore a darker Jim Carrey. I think that he is an incredible actor who has made some bad decisions and who has been forced into some bad decisions. But I'm glad that he got to do this, because what a lasting... This movie, this story will last for ages. And it's carried by him. Yeah,
the things that it has done culturally.
Mm-hmm. Again, we were kind of like...
For cinema in general.
Caveman and I were kind of half joking at the beginning before we started recording that these podcasts will last forever, right? That our voices talking about movies will one day be studied 300 years from now by some college student on Mars who wants to understand American pop culture in the 2000s. And they might listen to our podcast, like really silly kind of stuff like that. But if there is some Martian college student studying American pop culture, they're going to watch The Truman Show.
Yeah, I think I'd also give it a 4.
Yeah.
It is a really well done film. Mm-hmm. I wish it had won some other awards.
Yeah.
But I'm proud of Ed Harris and Jim Carrey for the awards they did receive.
Yeah.
It was a tough year that year across the board for everything. But the score, man, it deserved something better than what it got. So Maggie.
Yes, Caveman.
I have 2 questions for you.
Kick it.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Oh.
Would the presence of Oscar Isaac have made The Truman Show a better movie?
That's kind of tough because I think it's sort of perfect as is, but I think at the same time, if they remade this movie, he would be so good in it. Okay, so no, I don't think it would have made this version of this movie any better. I don't think that forcing him into this would have necessarily made the film better.
What if there's a remake?
So, in other words, who would he play if there's a remake?
If second question. If you could choose any...
He would make an incredible Kristoff.
I could see that.
There's a magic... Okay, so there's a level of empathy that Oscar Isaac has, especially towards younger people. So, say, like, the way that he treats Timothée Chalamet in Dune, right, as his son. You know, so there's some love and there's some empathy there, but there's also kind of evil craziness there, saying like Ex Machina or, you know, the Spider-Verse to an extent. So I think that he would make an incredible Kristoff to say like Daniel Kaluuya's Truman. Like what a phenomenal Truman he would have been. So yeah, I think that with the mixture of like empathy and cruelty that Oscar Isaac can portray so brilliantly with his perfectly beautiful face and incredible beard, right?
Sure.
Kristoff.
Yeah, all right.
That's my choice.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's a good choice.
He's so perfect and I love him. Damn. And that has been this week's episode of Movie Mingle on The Truman Show, and we hope you've enjoyed listening to it as much as we enjoyed making it for you. As ever, you can find us on Instagram, Threads, and Letterboxd at MovieMinglePod. You can always email us at movieminglepod@gmail.com. We recently got our first little bit of fan mail, and I can't tell you how excited that made me. So please, friends, if you want to chat, feel free to hit us up at movieminglepod@gmail.com. And don't forget, we're also on YouTube at Movie Mingle Podcast. Please join us again for next week where we will be talking about Wolf of Wall Street, which I'm quite excited about because I've only seen that movie once and I look forward to seeing it again. And until then, we hope that you honestly find something else on TV and go mingle. Bye!
Are you an effective team?
We are an effective team.
Let them fight.
How did you just do that?
I'm a really good lawyer.
Here on Caladan, we've ruled by air power and sea power. On Arrakis, we need to cultivate desert power.
Welcome, Mr. Beach. What's that bar? I'm a little confused.
Well, we wouldn't want that, would we?
I don't want to brag, but I will. I was in the Avengers.
The Avengers?
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. What is that?
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
Toga, 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 toga.